Welcome to the Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Intentional Way. And I'm glad to have our guest on today. He's a person that I've admired as long as I've known him. And Jared Greer is someone that has a rap sheet or a bio that I think is envious. And he'll probably explain more about things that I'm missing here, but he's an Ironman. He's running his own business. He's been a coach, a leadership coach, and manager, director. He's done a lot of things in his life, and he has a phenomenal family. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot about that. But besides the things that I already know and like about you, Jared, what is something that someone or the people listening should listen or hear about you that I haven't mentioned?
My last Ironman was 2016. So that's probably what they should hear. I don't know if you can classify yourself as an Ironman if it's been almost a decade since you've done one. But no, you're super kind. Great intro. Too kind, truly. Thank you.
Well, I'll take us back real quick to a time when I first met you, and you were a guy that was going and hiking Camelback Mountain in Scottsdale, Phoenix, Arizona. And I got invited to that and started to go up mountains and run a little bit with you guys. So you kind of introduced me into a world that I completely love. And so I appreciate that about you, that we would go and do that about once or twice a month. And I don't know that I was there every month with you, but I loved the times that I got up there with you. And I think I set my fastest time chasing you. So sorry about that. So Jared, we're here today, but you've introduced a little bit. The podcast is all about being intentional. And I find you as extremely intentional in the way that I experience you. So what would you have us know about how you operate in your life that would have you on a show called The Intentional Way?
Man, I think that's probably tricky. I think that's partially a perception from the outside looking in. There's certainly areas of my life that probably aren't as intentional as they should be, but it's something that I try to be intentional about as it relates to the most important things. So I would just say that being intentional for me is about being very targeted. So you gave a little bit of my background, starting at kind of the outer circles. Yes, I'm an executive coach. I work with 8-figure executives, anybody who's running or owns a $10 million business or above. So there's definitely a high level of intentionality that has to come with the work that I do, how I do it, etc. Then I'm very intentional about my health, right? We're working kind of in towards the center, my health, taking care of my body. And then it's my family and my time that I spend with my kids. And then it's my marriage and my time that I spend with my wife, and then it's my faith. So kind of like from the center out, I try to be intentional about those things, which means there's some things that I'm not very intentional about, or maybe I am intentional about keeping them out of the meddling with the rings and into the circle and into the bullseye, but just trying to make sure that the things that slip through the cracks, because things definitely slip through the cracks, are not the things that I'm going to just really regret later on.
So I think it's fascinating that you have created this circle, and I don't know if it comes from the circle of trust or what. Tell us, even the makeup of how you're describing it sounds intentional. So it's not like it's like some random, I kind of got this priority. Even the way you're explaining, like the inner circle, which you ended on faith, and the outer circle being your work and business and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I literally just came up with that right now, but I was trying to think of how to articulate it in a way that demonstrates the priority, where a lot of people will think about the center of a bullseye as the thing that they want. And while there's lots of things that we want, the center for me is not an income, it's not an event or an experience even. It's much more important and personal to that. And as I said, it's my faith is dead center, because when I am in alignment with my God, then I am better for my family. I am better for myself. I'm better for my clients, etc. So it kind of works its way out. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that I'll dabble in from time to time that are just far outside of those areas. And the
Yeah.
target that came to my mind is a good way to kind of visualize that and articulate that.
Okay. So the bullseye, the center being what permeates and spreads the goodness or the effectiveness of you outside of that inner circle, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So where do we want to go then, Jared? What ring on the circle are we going to dive into around where you feel like you're putting a lot of intention right now?
Well, intention's interesting. So when I work with my clients, I actually work them through three phases, which is really helping to build consistency, build correctness, and then build control. And so consistency is all about alignment with your vision and what you're trying to accomplish. So call that the target itself. Correctness is all about having the right tools, resources, strategies, and approaches to get the things done. And then our control, that is our level of effort, intensity, and you said it, intention. So something I always say when it comes to intention is that our attention to our intention is the opportunity. So that looks a lot of different ways and a lot of different scenarios, but one that I think is relevant to anybody with kids is we probably all at some point are sitting down with our families and having a meal, right? So that's where we're at. Well, what is our intention when we sit down at that meal with our family? Is our intention to just get through the meal and so we can shovel our kids off to bed? Is our intention to engage with our kids? Is our intention to set an example for our kids about what a healthy marriage looks like? Whatever that intention is, that's your opportunity. And people miss that. And so intention is super low in those moments, and they kind of just are on autopilot. We point out that when you lack that level of control, that will create a plateau in your life. It's going to create you essentially being stuck. And so when you are kind of doing the right things, being in the right places, like somebody who's sitting down for a meal with their family, you can just create this stuck feeling, this plateau type of feeling, and it is your intention that's going to allow you to push through it. So you sit down, you bring yourself a sense of awareness of what you're trying to accomplish, and that then, if we're using kind of my methodology, that kind of creates a domino effect of actions that allow you to break through. So, well, what do you do? If your intention is to connect with your kids during a meal, well, what does that look like? Well, now we're asking questions. Now we're listening. Now we're maybe making jokes. It's a way different experience than the person who comes home and is exhausted by their day and all of the craziness that they've handled. And now they're sitting down and just kind of going through the motions. Instead, they're in it. They're intentional. And that is the opportunity. That's the opportunity for so many people. And I'm just going to ramble. The downside of that is that people think they can't create change in their lives because their life is so busy and their plate is full and I've got so much to do. And you can actually squeeze out a ton of value if you just recognize those moments where you don't have any intention, you're not being thoughtful, you're not being intentional, and you flip a switch. And you just do the things you're already doing better with more intention.
So there's so much to dive into there, Jared, with what you've said. How does someone become aware? You said that we get on autopilot, we're maybe not aware is what you started describing, and then talked about how setting an intention, just doing the thing you're already doing with more awareness. So how does someone become aware that they're not aware?
Yeah, honestly, the very best way is to just be clear about what you're trying to accomplish. So I would take you all the way back. I mean, if I had a whiteboard, I'd just draw my model for you. But it takes you all the way back to that attempt to create consistency that starts with a really clear vision. So that vision is more robust than 95% of what people think when they think about a dream or a goal, because it's thoughtful in terms of what does dinner look like? What does it look like when I walk through the door? What does conflict look like in my family, with my spouse, with my kids? How do we handle these things? the thoughtfulness around it, which is also a level of intention, allows you to recognize it when it isn't there. And then attention to your intention is your opportunity. Here's what I want. Oh, wow, here's what I'm getting. Well, how do I kind of bridge that gap from me being sitting here on autopilot and me actually getting something out of this moment? So how do we, back to your question, how do we like create that awareness? Ask the simple question, what am I trying to accomplish? Ask that question 1,000 times a day. And you're gonna recognize that what happens most of the time is people respond emotionally and reactively instead of intentionally and aligned with that big picture, long-term vision of what they're trying to accomplish.
Fascinating. I would agree that is the magic. Like that's, I also wonder in that how portion, right? Asking yourself what you want to accomplish 1,000 times a day is a how, right? How, like when you're working with your clients that you've worked with, what practice do they, how do they get that in? How do they make that actually consistently relevant in their life where they're saying, what do I want to accomplish? As opposed to running through it on autopilot, as you said.
Yeah, so it's a process of developing that awareness. And self-awareness is kind of the first step in any type of coaching that we do, right? Because we don't, so research shows that we're actually pretty bad at deciding like how other people view us and perceive us. Like we're pretty bad at that. We either are like think of ourselves far too highly or not highly enough. So we're just generally bad at it. So raising a sense of self-awareness around what you want and then what that looks like is essential. That habit, it takes time to develop. Usually it'll come back in the form of my client will go off and they'll say, they'll go have their week and then they'll come back and they'll say, hey, I had this meeting and everything blew up. And I'll just pause and I'll say, okay, well, like, what did success look like for that? What were you trying to accomplish? Just a simple question. Oh, you know what? And I'm always looking for them to have asked that question beforehand versus afterhand. Because that's like what I call the $1 million millisecond where something happens and we've got that just split second to be like, hold on, what do I really want here? Do I want to win this fight? Do I want to be right in this moment? Do I want that person to feel bad? Or am I able to raise my gaze a little bit and be like, hold on, what I really want is a team that works well together. What I really want is a super strong marriage. What I really want is for the company to thrive. And if we can do that, it takes repetition, takes practice, takes recognition of those opportunities and those moments. If we do that, then that's the first domino that has to fall for us to make it a habit and to get and produce real change.
What about the times when people like they're holding on so tightly to being right? Like there might even be the times when an executive or someone you're working with is saying, yes, I want the company to thrive, or I want this person to do their job, but they use that word, but this person's doing such a crappy job, or they're doing, what is it that can overcome that real fierce, I do need to be right, and I want the company to thrive? Like, how do they overcome that?
So, man, I mean, we probably don't have the time to go into it. But as I said, that question of what am I trying to accomplish is the first domino that has to fall. The second domino is going to be around your values and what you value. And it's essentially the way that you pursue what it is you want. So that executive example that you just gave, oh, I want to be right. This person's terrible, right? For whatever reason. Well, I would say, first of all, we only coach the person in the room. So we don't talk about that other person. We say, okay, for you, okay, what did you want to accomplish? I want to take this person out of it. What do you want to accomplish? I got to have my company just running and clicking on all cylinders. Okay, great. So how do you handle this situation? How do you handle conflict with other people? Well, I want to handle conflict with other people with empathy, patience, kindness, care, those personal traits that are rooted in our values, right? So if that person says I hate that person, and I ground them in, okay, how do you want to handle conflict? Then we can contrast how you actually handled it.
Mhm.
Were you empathetic? Were you kind? Were you well, no. Had you been, what potential outcomes could have happened? And again, this is all layered into this intentional way of being intentional. What are you trying to accomplish? Being intentional. How are you going to show up? Then we get into beliefs, which is the third component, which is how you're thinking about yourself, others, and your circumstances. And I always say or beliefs are the hijackers of the vision. Beliefs are the hijackers of what you're trying to accomplish. So you can say, I want to have a cohesive, amazing team that works together well, but then you can believe my team can't handle feedback. Or you can believe that person doesn't want to be here. Or you can believe I'm not a good leader. And right, wrong, true, or false, it doesn't matter. All we know is that the beliefs are going to fuel actions that are you're going to take you towards your vision or away. So when we're being intentional, we've got to kind of create that alignment of what I call the core four: vision, really crystal clear about what we're trying to accomplish, our values, who we are, how we're showing up, our beliefs, how we think about ourselves, others, and our circumstances, and then the actions that we take that eventually develop into habits.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. When you said what you've just said around the beliefs hijacking the vision, it reminds me of a quote, my favorite quote, currently top of the list book, Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Yep.
It says, you don't rise the level of your goals, you fall the level of your systems. Like the executive or the human being or the team that is, everybody wants to win. Everybody wants the outcome of success. I mean, typically, right? I mean, maybe that's arguable. But typically, if there's two teams that want to play a game, they each want to win. They have the goal to win. But so systems, like if those beliefs are not in line with the goal or the intention, then you can't make it happen, or it won't happen as often.
100%. And you're talking about, and I love James Clear, and Atomic Habits is a phenomenal book. When we're talking about everybody wants to win, yeah, we can say that everybody does want to win, but many lack the discipline to do the work. I always just say discipline churns the butter. Everybody wants butter. Everybody wants to have the finished product, the outcome. But how many people want to sit there and crank on the crank until the cream gets its thickness and eventually is butter? Very few. But that is a crank you can't let go of. If you truly want that outcome, you have to be somebody who has the discipline to churn that crank. And so discipline is kind of like the sister to intention, where you've got to have discipline in those moments, but it's got to be coupled with a really positive intention. Otherwise, you will self-destruct. You'll sabotage your own goal, and you'll wake up one day down the road having done a whole bunch of stuff, but really missing a lot of those layers that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. So that circles us back to what you began with as far as consistency. Like I know discipline and consistency are not the same, but consistent discipline can accomplish what you're talking about. That's cool. Very cool. So Jared, take us back to ground zero. We've been kind of in the theoretical. Now, I'm not saying this is actually all theory, but obviously it's your teachings, what you actually help people do. Let's ground us here. Give me an example from your life, something that you're doing, something that's going on in your life. Touch us back to ground.
Yeah, so I can talk about what I'm doing now. I can talk about what I started at. I think probably one of the, like, where all of this started to come to fruition for me, and just seeing this model of the C3 model, the consistency, correctness, and control, actually happened there in Arizona when I was getting invited to go to the gym at lunch every day. And I didn't really want to lift a lot of weights. I didn't really want to go to the gym because I played a lot of basketball. And I was like, I don't want the gym to mess up my basketball shot. And then I realized I don't have a good basketball shot anyways. So I was going with these guys. And I think for probably like the first year, I didn't see any results. Truly. Because I'd go and we'd hang out and we'd talk, and I was dinking around, and I was, hanging out with them. Well, then after about a year, people started to kind of go their way. They got promoted or they left the company or what have you. And our kind of like core group started to kind of fizzle a little bit. But I'm already going, so I may as well just go. But maybe since I'm going, I maybe should put a little effort into learning what I'm doing here and actually like spending some time working different muscles and that kind of thing. And so I started to see some gains there. But it wasn't until a little bit later where then it was like, okay, well, hey, I'm seeing some progress. Maybe I'm going to like really push it. Like I'm going to really see what's possible here. And about that time, I started getting into endurance racing and started just pushing myself further. And as I looked back and reflected, I recognized that consistency only happened because I was in a social environment. But what it did was it built consistency. It built a habit. That foundation of consistency, I was able to apply the correct tools, now technique and skill and ability of how to do lifts, what kind of lifts, what kind of things would build my endurance versus my muscular strength, etc. And then on the foundation of consistency and the correct tools, then I was able to actually build in some intensity. So really good present day example of this last year. I trained for a marathon. Every year I set a goal to get in the best shape of my life. And this year I set a goal to run a sub 3:30 marathon, which
Wow.
my previous best time was a 3:45. So I needed to cut it I needed to cut it to 3:15 minutes or so. I've been consistent every single year for the last probably 15 years. I've run at least a marathon, if not an ultra marathon, Ironman, something intense, something crazy.
Yeah.
So this year I was like, okay, I really got to get this goal. And I started pursuing it. I actually got some coaching, somebody to help me out, build a plan for me. And I ended up beating my goal time by about 30 minutes.
Whoa. Goal time
So
is 3:30.
My goal time was 3:30. I ended up clocking in at 3:16.
That's awesome.
So beat my PR. Beat my PR by 30 minutes. My PR at that point had been 3:45.
Yeah.
So I look back again, foundation of consistency. I've always been running. I've always been working out and doing this kind of stuff. And my intensity has been high in the past, for sure. I've done some pretty intense things. But what I had this year that I haven't had in the past is new knowledge around nutrition, health, running that I didn't have before. And so that's when everything kind of converges and we're able to get the best results because we've got those three: consistency, we've got the correct tools, strategies, approaches, and then we've got the right level of intensity, which is also that intention and that discipline.
Okay.
That's kind of a origin story and also modern day application.
Yeah, I love that. So we could maybe, as I'm hearing you and kind of spitting it back to you, we could say that part of that consistent effort came because you set an intention. Now, your origin story with you being in the gym, and then when everybody kind of left, you decided, look, I'm going to stick around and do this with purpose as opposed to just doing it, maybe, is what it sounded like. Like you made the flip in your own mind of, hey, I'm here. I might as well get something more out of this, especially since the social relationships were changing. And then with your consistent effort of, you said marathon, to beat your PR, you beat it by almost 30 minutes, you say, that's absolutely incredible. But that came because you wanted it, like meaning you had a desire to create something different as opposed to what you'd always had. Now, still crazy to say you always had this marathon of 3:45. That's crazy in like the normal context of human experience, but you have a normal experience of 3:45 marathons, which is, if anybody knows that, that's still incredible, by the way. Anyways, but because of your intention, it changed your outcome, and you got help. You found other ways to improve it because of that intention.
Yeah, for sure. And the intention is, as I said, that's kind of that control component where we have to increase our level of intention. So that intention is at the highest level, towards this big goal. But that intention is around every day when I'm going out to do my training runs. every day when I sit down to eat, every time that I'm like calculating calories. Through this training block, I lost like 30 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Just because I was managing everything. Like everything was like a very high level of
You don't seem like
integrity.
a guy that has 30 pounds to lose, man.
I believe it or not, yeah, I did. I went from 185, I raced at 155.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I just look at all of that and I say, that's why intensity is kind of like the last thing, because I wouldn't ever suggest to somebody who's saying, hey, I'm thinking about running, thinking about getting into running. There's no way I would say, okay, cool. Here's your like marathon plan. Here's the nutrition plan. Here's how many calories you can eat. Here's how often you have to run. Here's how hard you have to push. That would be crazy. That would be that self-destruct kind of behavior. But I would say, okay, go out and run 3 times a week.
Yeah.
No distance, no time, no speed. Just go put yourself, as James Clear says, show up. Put yourself in a place where you can do the thing consistently and then start to sprinkle in new knowledge, techniques. How often do I run? What kinds of workouts do I run with? And then later on, you start to add in speed, distance, and all of that.
Yeah. And let me maybe add a little bit to what you said, because it all depends on what your intention is, right? If my intention is to run a marathon, then that's a different set of parameters. It's a different set of work that I'm going to do and intensity, versus when I first started running with you and the crew and a couple of your brothers, I couldn't run over a mile. I was always a sprinter, football, like it's just like short bursts of energy, never long distance. And I loathed it really in my early, my early 20s, late 20s. Yeah, didn't love it. So I remember that I set out an intention or a goal that year when I started running with you guys to become a runner. And that's different than trying to get a marathon at 3:15 or 3:30, right?
Yep.
I wanted to be able to define myself internally, like in between my ears, to be able to say, I'm a runner. And the way that I personally define runner was those people that you always see running outside and doing all their stuff. And you're like, why are they running? Like I wanted to identify as that kind of person. And so my set of the how or the work that I had to put in is different than if I was trying to run a marathon, or my intention was different than what I. So I'm just pointing out to those that are listening, it doesn't matter so much the intention. I mean, I think there may be a hierarchy of intention, if you will, but at some level, it doesn't matter as much as having an intention and going after something that you don't already have, whatever that may be. Would that sound accurate to you, Jared?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying in order to be a runner, you need to see yourself running. Period. And at that stage, when you're focusing on building consistency, literally that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Repetition is the only measurement of consistency. So your intention to become a runner, to be a runner, is great as long as you see yourself running.
Yeah.
That you're in alignment, like that's happening for you. So let's take it out of like the fitness world and let's take it into like relationships. Okay. We've got employees, we've got children, we have marriages. So you've got your spouse that you've got these conflicts with. So what does consistency look like with conflict? We know intentionally we want to have a great marriage. That's my assumption. You want to have a good relationship with your kids. You want things to be going well with the people in your life. Well, conflict comes in. So what do you do with conflict? Well, sometimes we don't have conversations. We shy away from it. We brush it under the rug. We assume it's going to take care of itself. So we're now, if our intention is to have a great relationship, we're now inconsistent. We're out of alignment with having those great relationships if we're not willing to have conversations about conflict or in the face of conflict. So what do? Well, you start having the wrong conversations. At a minimum, you have the wrong conversations.
Okay.
You have arguments, you have debates, you have discussion. And as long as you are, and I'm talking about obviously being ethical and still kind at the end of the day, even if you totally just bomb in those, but you keep having them, you are in alignment with your intention. You're going to get better at it, which means you're going to then down the road be able to increase the intensity, the type of conversations that deepen the relationship and make it even better. And that happens at every level. That's a boss to their employee. That's a parent to their child. That's a husband to their wife, and vice versa. So I just emphasize the importance of when you're just starting something and maybe your intention is young and raw and you're like, I don't really know, but I know I want that. Start seeing yourself do it wrong and consistently do it before you give up. Obviously, we don't want you to give up, but so that you can start seeing the results build on themselves and you get better at it. And then you start getting excited, and then your intensity can increase.
I love it. And it's interesting because there's so many like rabbit holes we could go down to accomplish here. I think you said there's an underlying premise that when you want to have great relationships, you have to want to have a great relationship with that person you're speaking with. If you don't care about having a relationship with that person, then you won't put in the effort. So I think that premise is you do have to want a great relationship. And then the other thing that I think is really important is I define like becoming a runner. I had parameters of what that meant to me. And I don't want to overexert effort here that someone has to have some perfectly researched. It took them 6 months to define what is a great relationship. I'm just saying, take 5 minutes and define what a great relationship is with that individual. And then that will be the guiding thoughts. And maybe that comes back to the values and beliefs that you've talked about, that when you define what a great relationship is with that specific person that you want to have a relationship with, then you can operate in a way that it enhances it, that makes it improved versus what it is. And I love that you said basically imperfect action trumps perfect action. Do anything toward what you're trying to accomplish. And you like, I would much rather go at it and get a bump on my head and find out not a good idea. Let's try it a different way, as opposed to I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to get in the ring. I'm not even going to try to improve this relationship because it's just too stressful. It's too much, as opposed to, I'm going to go do something about it. And that's at the core what I love about intention. Like, if you don't see yourself as a part of the solution, like you're never going to change it. So,
yeah, you're exactly right. And just to add on to that, because there's a common phrase that we love to talk about right now, which is like progress over perfection, right? And people love it. And I get it. It makes sense. Yeah, we want to see progress over perfection. But the reality is, when you are doing something that you've never done or something that's really difficult, that progress is going to be almost unrecognizable. The person who comes and has a fight with their spouse and it blows up and they cold shoulder each other for the next 4 days, like, where's the progress in that? So I've edited that quote a little bit to be like, persistence over perfection. Be persistent. Come back to the table every single time. Come back to the plate every single time. Come back and keep, as you said, keep trying. Why? Because when we're bad at something and we want to be good at something, we have to cross something called the bridge of mediocrity. You've got to be bad before you can be good. And you'll never be bad if you're not doing the thing. So allow yourself that grace of learning and doing it wrong as you trudge across persistently that bridge of mediocrity to the other side that has everything that you want. Too many people right now are staying on the other side. They're too afraid to cross the bridge, and they're staying in what I call fear island. And that fear island is shrinking, and eventually you'll have nowhere to go.
But it's so much more comfortable, Jared, to research my problems. It's so much more comfortable to think about them, to ruminate about them. It's so much more comfortable to do that than actually do something about them. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I would say, well, tell me what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
We'd go back to what you're trying to accomplish, and then we would talk about the core 4 values, how you're showing up, and those beliefs, because that's a belief that you just said right there. It's so much more comfortable to research it. And I would really challenge that. Okay, what actions come when you say it's so much more comfortable to research it? What actions follow that?
You read up on the idea. You think about it.
Great. So let's change that belief into something that pushes you forward. What would that sound like?
We'll do something.
What's the belief? Give me an empowering belief that is going to move you to the right action of doing something.
Well, I believe that if I go confront or I go talk, that it will, at minimum, get me more information. Like, I'm talking about relationships, right? So at minimum, if I go and put myself in conflict's way, go talk to the person, that I'll at least learn where they sit on the subject, if at nothing else.
Beautiful. So I'm going to oversimplify it for you. What you said first was it's just so much more comfortable to go and research. We now just changed that belief. You changed that belief from it's so much more comfortable to research into it's better to learn by doing. I'll learn faster by doing. The best learning comes from action, right? Those are all beliefs that what actions then follow those. Well, action. You're going to have the conversation. You're going to step up to the plate. You're going to take the swing. You're going to take the risk. You're going to move instead of playing it safe, researching. I'm not saying there's not a place for research.
Yeah.
But that research has to lead to action. And that's where beliefs become the hijackers, because people wait their whole life to research and know enough, when all that really is just smoke and mirrors, so they don't have to cross that bridge from where I am now to where I want to go and not be great at it along the way.
Yeah. I truly believe that's one of the subtle killers in life, is that we're not willing to look bad at doing something, whatever it may be. We were talking about relationships, we talked about fitness, we talked about other things. You could put this in any category of your life. To want something that you want, but you know that you have very beginner, novice skill set at, take some courage. And I think it's easier to avoid, it's easier to be distracted by other things in life than actually go after that thing, because of what you said. We don't want to look bad. We don't want to look like we're failures, where that is the way. Like yeah. Failing is the way. So, yeah.
Yeah, just in that same vein, I go to the gym 6 days a week. I know the people there. And what happens every December 25th, 26th? Well, all the regulars start talking about the flood of people who are going to be there January 1st. And listen,
Absolutely.
I don't know that I love it either yet. To your point, courage that these people have to take coming back, coming in for the first time, trying when it's been 6 months or a year, that takes a ton of courage. I often say that one of the most courageous things you'll ever have to do is trying again at something you've already failed at. And that's what's happening January 1st. And we see it all over the internet. There's all these memes about, okay, it's January 1st. Here's all the people. Here's what it looks like. And I'm like, great that they're there. Please stick with it. Dial down the intensity. You don't have to lift the same weight that you lifted in high school or your college years. Dial down the intensity. Just come in, scan your thing, maybe look at the weights, and then leave. And come back tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, the next day, and before you know it, you'll be lifting more than what you lifted in high school or college, if you stick with it. But you've got to push across that bridge of mediocrity. You've got to do what you've never done. You've got to look dumb like you've never looked, if you really, truly want that thing that you say you want.
Yeah. It's interesting. You make me think about a guy we used to work with. I won't name his last name, but John. And I actually read this in James Clear's book, but I don't think he was referencing this guy, John. But his goal was to just be at the gym, just to go there and experience, do the effort to wake up in the morning, to go to the gym, stay there for a couple minutes and leave. Like, it wasn't. And the reason why I'm highlighting this at all is because it doesn't matter where you are. It just matters what you want and the desire that you have when you're connecting this to intention. So if you want to be successful at the consistency, you can do like everybody else and go and do a 45-minute workout 3 days the first week of January, and then your muscles and mentally you're sore, and then you probably get sick because your body's overwhelmed and is trying to save you from this like terror that you're causing it. Yeah. And so you now have a cold on top of it, so you quit. And then the intensity is gone, and then maybe you do it a little bit. Whereas do something simple enough times that people but who cares what people think? I say that out loud, knowing that I care what people think. We all do at some level.
Sure.
But it sucks to like, we look around us and think that everybody else cares. They don't even recognize who you are. They might say, oh, I remember seeing that guy at the gym once. But when you go and you're there for 5 minutes, you leave, no one cares. That's you making something like way worse. So again, the crazy thing about intention is you can have it, but then the ego and all the things that happen in your environment, your atmosphere, try to push you back to the status quo, to the norms that you're experiencing in life. And so you don't keep doing the things. So I just preaching what you're saying, Jared, is that the consistency reigns king, and I didn't create this. You created your curriculum, but I can understand why that's the foundation of anything that you're teaching. Is we got to make it consistent before we can do anything else with it.
Yeah, and it's rooted in intention, which is what you're having this podcast about. It's rooted in intention, and there's too many of us that are just letting what we really want slip away. Truly. And I think in our society is not helping at all. I think it's normalizing mediocrity. I think the ways that we stretched and pushed ourselves even 10 years ago is now looked at as, whoa, that's just crazy. Don't even think to try that. Stay down here. And that is, for my kids, I think of it as quicksand. It's them being sucked into something that they won't be able to get out of if they tango with it.
Yeah. Well, Jared, you mentioned your kids. I'm interested. We've had discussions enough that I know a bit about your family life. I would say maybe 1% of your family life, and that impresses me, and that's enough for me. I would love to know more, but I'm saying it's enough for me to know that you're intentional there. Tell me about how you are with your kids that would cause us to learn something about, you and your intentions.
Yeah, I think my intentions with my kids follow my core four. My vision for them is to just have deep relationships with them, to communicate effectively, to put ourselves on equal playing fields, not a hierarchy of it's us versus them. And that leads to the actions that follow that is that we have really in-depth conversations. We are more strict parents than all of their friends. In fact, this will probably blow a lot of minds, but we just canceled all of our streaming services with the exception of Amazon Prime because I think we keep it anyways. And we didn't necessarily do that for the kids and what they consume. It's part of kind of our financial ecosystem that we're building. But I've got no qualms about setting up bigger barriers between our family and kind of the norm of the world. So they don't have phones. My 12-year-old daughter still has a 7:30 bedtime. She has to be in her room at 7:30. She goes to bed at 8:30. That's kind of their life. That's coupled with lots of time together. I mean, I see my kids every single morning. We do breakfast together. We do. I'll see my youngest at lunch. I'm there when my kids come home. We have family dinner together. We play games together. We talk a lot. So much that when I hear other parents are like, oh, my 12-year-old doesn't talk to me at all, or my teenager doesn't. And I'm like, well, you probably didn't listen enough when they were watching My Little Ponies and talking about all the My Little Ponies characters endlessly. Because that's all I was thinking about 10 years ago when my 2-year-old was like, Dad, My Little Ponies. And she would just go off and just keep talking and talking. And I would just, and I would ask questions. Why? Because I knew that was going to translate later on in life to, so everybody at school, they're starting to like these rumors about me and this boy. Oh, how does that make you feel? I don't really like it, especially from my friends. Well, what are you going to do about it? Those kinds of conversations, like I feel lucky to be a part of now because of that level of engagement and intention that I had when they were younger and that my wife had, that now has set us up to really be a part of the decisions being made, the chaos that they're facing from whether it be teachers or other kids. So that's, I just think, again, we're talking now like more center of the circle, right? So I can get intentional about a lot of stuff, but when it comes to my family, that's where I really try to dial it in.
That's impressive. That's impressive. And it sounds like you're bucking against a lot of what society would have you be. I mean, I think give the kid, what is it? I keep seeing, my kids have to earn their screen time and they've got 4 hours of it or 2 hours or whatever it is. So I don't mean to be judgmental here, but the society of what it is to be a parent and be a kid in a family today is starkly contrast from even my childhood, let alone my parents' or grandparents' childhoods. It's so different now. And I'm grateful that I live now as opposed or that I'm a parent now as opposed to a kid now. It'd be difficult. So I recognize it's different times, and um, good on you for doing something different than what is out there. And again, that just highlights your level of intention. It doesn't mean that people listening, you have to do it the way Jared does it. It's fine. But to have an intention as opposed to the autopilot way is what separates you as a parent from the rest of the parents, and you and your kids from the rest of the kids.
Yeah, and I for people who are listening, I don't think that I'm a closed-minded person. You might be thinking,
Yeah.
yeah, he's a closed-minded person because he's dropping streaming services, he won't give them a phone. But I'm very curious about what other parents are doing. As it relates even to like smartphones, like I've had so many conversations about smartphones and teenagers specifically. And I asked parents like, hey, would you do it again? And it's a resounding no.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of, as we've talked about it as a family, we've kind of posed the question. I posed this to my 12-year-old who her friends are all getting them now. Well, hey, who do you know that is a good example of phone use? And it is hard for my 12-year-old to even come up with an example of who's a good example of phone use. We then ask, well, okay, of the people that we see, do we feel like it's helping them thrive? Or even those good examples, we have thought of one good example, does it just not hinder them from being what she would be otherwise, right? Does it just not scratch the potential down a little bit? And it's just hard to find good examples of people, not just kids, people who are good with their phones, let alone kids who, even if they're not like devastated by the use of it, it's not helping them be better. And so it's that kind of thoughtful conversation that we're open to having, and we're interested in hearing good people's experiences. But when I talk to parents and they're like, I wouldn't do it again, or they feel like their hands are tied because every other kid has a phone and their kid doesn't, and they're like, well, what do we do? Or they're like, oh yeah, I can't believe how often my kids are on their phones and devices when they're on their phones and devices the whole time. It's just really hard to make the argument that, yeah, it's a good thing to give to them right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, so we could go off on that for a while.
Yeah. Some words of wisdom from a friend of mine said, wars are start over what's taken away, not what's given. So there's some sensibility in that, and what a fascinating situation. I remember one of my favorite videos you did a long time ago was a TikTok hack. And it was, dude, it made me laugh for solid 2 minutes, dude. I was just dying. Because you get, at the time, I was like, okay, social media, check us out. He's got a little hack for TikTok. I wonder what it is. And it was like, go over here, point here, highlight this, delete TikTok. And I thought that was great. I just thought that made my day. I thought it was hilarious. For me and my purposes, it was great. So thanks for.
I've got no doubt my kids will be on social media eventually, but I am just not in any hurry to make that a reality for them right now. And my oldest is 12, and so most people say, well, they shouldn't be on it till they're 13 anyways. My 12-year-old won't be on there, or they'll give their kids a phone and be like, oh, but they're not on social media. And to me, the long game is I want a kid who can communicate with adults in person. Yeah. And if that means that they have to be left out of a couple parties, sorry, they'll be able to go in and kill it in an interview, work for a full work day, get amazing results, and be able to have a joyful life. And that to me is more worth it than a couple of tears on a Friday night when everybody's at some party that they found out about on Instagram.
Yeah, yeah. To just give you a little full circle, I was talking with a couple of parents that are, I would say, comparative to you. They're touted as the most strict parents in the neighborhood and that kind of thing. And I hadn't seen them for a few years. And I saw them just a couple weeks ago. And their oldest, he's 17. And there's a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. Every one of those kids was able to carry on a full-blown conversation with me. And It was awesome. Like a stark contrast from most kids that can't even look me in the eye. And I even asked him about, what do you attribute this to? You're one of the only teenagers here that's just talking with me, man. Why do you? He's like, well, it's interesting. I mean, there's something to talk about. Like other kids don't want to talk. And it's just it's so interesting that they may not see that in the moment, but there is a fruition. And I'm just going to bring it back full circle, is that's the reason why it's important to have intent. Like it's important to have a long-term intention if you can muster it. It doesn't have to be a perfect intent, but having an intent and seeing that, look, I want my kid to be this kind of a person. I want my kid to be this type of a citizen, this kind of a human being that sees things this way. Then there are things you have to sacrifice or say no to in order to get that. Everything is like that. If you want anything, that means you have to say no to other things. If I want to have a steak dinner, that means I have to say no to chicken or to taquitos, or I have to say no to other things. So I love what you've said.
And the beauty of that, Bryan, is that you don't know what to choose if you haven't been clear about what you're trying to accomplish. If you don't know, think about a treasure map. If that X marks the spot, that's where all the treasure is, then it makes a lot of sense to follow the dotted lines. But if you don't have that X, you haven't been clear about what you're trying to accomplish for your life, and you have just the dotted lines, like where are you going and why would you follow them? So step one is getting crystal clear about what you're trying to accomplish, so that when you've got to make those decisions in the heat of the moment, when there's peer pressure and there's all this other stuff going on, you can remind yourself, hold on, what I'm shooting for is far beyond where this is going. It's much higher. It's much more important, which means this decision right now in this moment matters a whole bunch more. Because we can't just set up rules and guidelines for our kids. We've got to also offer them the support and the companionship so that they don't feel like they're just living in a prison with rules and boundaries and nobody to help them along, nobody to help them see the good that's coming out of the boundaries that have been set.
Yeah. I'm going to make a request of the listeners that if you were thinking about our last part of the conversation, all about how it applies to children and kids, I would have you rewind it and listen and then have it apply only to you as opposed to your kids, like how you create for yourself in that same way. So, Jared, I've had a great time here with you. I'd love to know what few pieces, as we kind of close down our conversation here, what few pieces of information haven't we shared that you want to make sure that listeners grasp at the end of our conversation here?
Listen, my encouragement for anybody is always to take the time to get clear about what you're trying to accomplish. I think there's probably nothing more devastating than people further down the road, later on in life, who arrive at whatever their destination is, only to realize that it's not where they wanted to be. It's not who they wanted to be with. Maybe the people who they wanted to be with are missing. They're not in the shape that they had hoped they would be in. So my encouragement to anyone and everyone is to take the time, sit down for 30 minutes and write out what the next 10 years look like, and be really thoughtful about all the areas of your life. Go back and check it for, okay, what about my life right now is in complete contrast to what I'm trying, where I want to go. And then just start making those small little tweaks and changes to change the trajectory, because there's nothing more important you could be doing with your time than being thoughtful about where you want to go, and then every single day doing something to move yourself in that direction.
Jared, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for participating in this episode of The Intentional Way. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.